Hey everybody, what's going on out there? Good to have you back again. Hope you're having a great day out there. So last week we took a look at some things called scales, and we talked about major and minor tonalities based on scales. A little bit tedious sort of thing. A great thing for us to use if we ever want to become a practicing musician, no matter what instrument you play, especially if you're a keyboard player. And it really is one of those building block ideas for what we use whenever we make music. So we're going to actually expand upon that today, and we're going to talk about a few things called chords and exactly what are chords, what are the rules to make chords, and how are chords made, and then how are they used in songs, and if we use the notes of a chord in different ways, what they can turn into. So we're going to take a look at that today, and we're going to take a look at some ways that chords have been used in popular music over the years, and to get a decent idea how to put together our own chord progression. All right, guys, so we're going to hop over and take a look at that. All right, guys, so welcome back. Today we're going to get into focusing on really on one of the basic things in all of harmony and exactly what harmony is. So we're going to be talking about something called chords. Now, chords, by definition, are three or more pitches sounded at the same time. All right, so here it is. Now, the key word here is same, because if we have three or more pitches that are played one after another, say, for example, like we did in Mary Had a Little Lamb or any of the songs we've learned, that's not quite what harmony is. Now, harmony is when we have three pitches at the same time, which we'll come back to more. Now, you may be saying, well, what about if we have two pitches played at the same time? Is that a chord? Well, really with chords, we like to say three or more pitches, like three, four, or maybe even more. Most of the time, three or four is the most common. But there is also a term for something that is when we have two pitches at the same time. And we call that a dyad, D-Y-A-D. Now, a dyad can maybe imply a chord, but it's not necessarily a chord itself only having two pitches. But that's what we're going to start off with today. So what we need to do is we're going to take more than one pitch and play them at the same time. But the question, of course, is what pitches do we use? So we're going to go back to what we talked about last week, which is, of course, scales. Now, all of the pitches that we're going to use in chords, we're going to come back to scales, not just any part of the scale, but scale degrees. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to put out the most commonly used major scale that we have, which is, of course, our C major scale. Now, of course, we use C quite a bit on the keyboard. And really, this is the reason why. It's because we don't have to worry about any sharps or flats. No black keys, all the white keys. That's part of the reason we like to use C major so much. Now, in this scale, C is the first pitch. So we're also going to call this a special name. The first pitch of a scale, we are going to call this the root note. Now, like roots, it's at the bottom of the tree. It's the first thing. It's where everything grows from. That's where this term comes from. So we have C is our root pitch right there, scale degree 1. D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A is 6, B is 7, and C, of course, again, 8 is the same as 1, but we say this C is up an octave, 8 pitches away. So it's the same pitch, just an octave apart from the root. So now we have our scale. And of course, to make the scale, I used our good old formula, the whole, half, whole, half formula between each pitch. So I went back to my chromatic scale from last week, which we can always bring back in a little bit. Hopefully you guys made a cheat sheet from last week. And I, of course, used that formula to come up with our major scale. So that's what the W's and the H's mean. I put the little dashes to say which note it's going between. Now that we have our major scale, let's make some dyads. Don't want to call them chords, but two pitch sets that are going to play at the same time. So make some dyads. So let's say, for example, if we want to start right with our root, boom. What we like to do when we start to build up dyads and later chords is we like to do an interval called a third. Now, last week we talked about the whole step and we talked about the half step. Now, the whole step is, of course, 2 half steps. But we didn't talk about an interval beyond that. What if we wanted to have 3 half steps or 4 half steps? Well, that is when we start dealing with going beyond one letter. And we start going not from one letter to the second letter, but from one letter to the third letter beyond where you start. So in order to get to thirds, we're going to have 2 different types of thirds, which I'll come back to in a little bit. Just stand by for that. What we're going to do is actually we're going to go from the first pitch of the we're going to go from the first pitch of the scale, the root, C, and we're going to go up to the third pitch of this, and that's going to be E. So if we were to have C and E at the same time, this would be what we call a dyad, okay? But if I were to say take from, let's go to the next pitch, from D, and I wanted to build a third above D, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3. This would also be a dyad, okay? Now, let's take a look here at what type of third this is. Let's think back to last week. We took a look at this here thing called, of course, for those of you that don't remember, this is the chromatic scale. Now, this right here is kind of like our Rosetta Stone, our alphabet of music with everything that we're allowed to use. All right, this is our full set of options for pitches right here. Now, let's take a look from our first dyad. We said from C to E. Let's count how many half steps that is. Last week, of course, we talked about C from C to D is 1, 2 half steps from C to D. 1, 2. But if we want to get from C to E, that is from C up to C sharp is 1, 2, 3, 4. See, from C to E is 4 half steps. So let's remember that. From D to F, our other dyad, we said, let's count this. 1, 2, 3. That's only 3 half steps. Now, of course, from C to E, that's 3 letters apart. From D to F, that's 3 letters apart. But the amount of half steps in between are different. And this is where the term major and minor come back. So let's go back to our dyads. From C to E is what we call major. And from D to F, we call this minor. Not just anything, but a major third and a minor third because of the number of half steps. Right here, we had 4 half steps between C and E. That's a major third. Down here, we had 3 half steps between D and F. So that's a minor third. Now, this is going to be very important here as we go on forward. So now that we have our dyads planned, we can now talk about, guess what comes next? If a dyad is 2 pitches, when you have 3 pitches in a chord, we call that a triad, because tri, T-R-I, of course, means 3. So this is a triad is a 3-pitch chord. Now, you may be saying, wait, why are you writing that again if you said 3 or more pitches over here? Well, a chord is just an overall term. A triad is a very specific version of a type of chord, okay? Because there's other types of chords we're going to learn about later, because of course it does say or more. So a 3-pitch chord is what we call a triad. So all we have to do to make a triad is take a dyad, and we're going to actually stack another third on top of the second note of our dyad. So let's go ahead and try this out. Let's take these same dyads and turn them into triads. So for example, if we had our good old C, well, we already said that a third above C, 1, 2, 3, is E. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add a third pitch to this chord. So we have 2. So we're going to go with another third above E. So we had 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 3 above E is G. So this right here would be a triad. Now let's go down here from our D triad. So we said on our D dyad, we had D, we had F. From D to F is 1, 2, 3. If we want to go another third above F, 1, 2, 3, we end up on the pitch A. So this right here would become the third note of our D triad. Now, of course, we said that the major third was here because between these 2 pitches right here, the first 2 pitches of this chord, this is what we call a major third. But now let's take a look at from E to G, from our second triad in here, because there's 2 triads stacked on top of each other here. You see from C to E, from E to G. So let's take a look at this E to G and see if that is also a major triad or if it's a minor triad. If we come back to our chromatic scale, from E to G is 1, 2, 3 half steps. We should know that 3 half steps is a minor third. So what we have here is a minor third sitting on top of a major third. All right, guys, that's all we have for part 1 today. So I'll see you guys back here for part 2 in a little bit.